Hello, Wizard J 2012 here, and welcome to a new review I'm doing. Over the week I managed to binge watch the entire first season of Hulu and WB Animation's new Animaniacs 2020 reboot, a much anticipated reboot of the classic Warner Brothers cartoon, Animaniacs. I already did a thought video on the trailer back when it first came out, so click or tap here for you to go see it if you haven't already. But long story short, the trailer looked very promising with some old faces returning, despite some news behind it. Now that it is out, and that I've seen it in its entirety, I think it's best to do a review. And what do I think of this reboot? Does it stay true to the charm of the original, or does it fall flat on its face? Let's find out. But before I do, I imagine the majority of people here would have seen the original Animaniacs, or at least know about it. But just in case you don't, it's a variety show filled with cartoony antics, songs, pop culture, and a big cast of characters, including the main characters, the Warner siblings, Yakko, Wakko, and Dot. It's a fantastic cartoon that I recommend watching even today, as it brings so much to the table. Now, with that mini introduction out of the way, let's dive in about the different aspects of the series, discuss what I liked and didn't like about them, as well as hope for what Season 2 can bring. Let's commence with the first part you see, given that it's a visual part of the audiovisual medium, the animation. The animation is really good in this series, simply put. I love these character designs in this reboot, and now that I've seen all 13 episodes of it, I've given time to appreciate it properly. The designs on the Warners and the mice look so great, and considering the art style, they fit together and flow nicely, and they move in a very wacky way, more so on the Warners. Talking about the art style, it looks simple but fitting for what the show is trying to be. The lighting is mostly well done, as a lot of shots also look outstanding, such as the Pinky and the Brain intro, the backgrounds in general, or even any time the animation style changes, such as in the segment Bun Control, where there was the part where it was an anime style. No, I'm not making that fun. I love the animation style and designs here too, to the point that I was honestly convinced Studio Trigger did it, even if I know it isn't. I know everybody loves Anime Dot, but I kinda like the design of Anime Wakko. He kinda looks like an absolute unit and I love him. His design here reminds me of a bit of Big Billy from the Powerpuff Girls. I know he's probably inspired by some other anime fatso, but I can't really place my finger on it. There was also the main moment in the cutening where it had an all cutesy style, almost Sanrio levels, which I thought was really neat. If I had to criticize the animation, it would be that it isn't quite as fluid as the original, and that sometimes the colors can be a tad loud, mainly on the characters, but apart from that, the animation is really great, even if personally I think the original has held up better despite the decades between animation. Maybe if it had a bit more lighting and shading on it, I can easily say it's just as good as the original. The music is also awesome and classic. A lot of music in this reboot are certainly fitting for the Animaniacs series, especially since both Steven and June Lee Bernstein returned to compose from the original. In fact, in some moments you even get to hear the leitmotifs for the Warners themselves, which just makes me feel so happy inside. I love the music is orchestrated, but it isn't shy to try out different varieties like rap or techno. It certainly sounds familiar to Animaniacs fans. Speaking of sounding familiar, the theme song. I was actually really curious to know how that would be different, and I'm glad to say that most of it sounds just like before. Of course they had to make some changes to the lyrics, which is perfectly acceptable. Although one of the lines in the third verse was changed to Dot has wit, whereas the original had Dot is cute. I can't tell if they misheard a lyric or it was a deliberate change, but what do I know, I'm just nitpicking. One of the biggest lyrical changes is in the fourth verse. Now, if you ever heard the original theme, you would know that the verse mentions some of the segments that were featured in the original Animaniacs, but since they don't appear in the reboot, or do they? More on that later. They changed it to how they hired a cast to make it perfect for everyone, but also take the piss on trolls that would take offense to that change of the verse in the intro. I love that. Well, I know what else I love? The songs. I was excited to know about this part, and thankfully the reboot knows how to deliver on that front. I swear this show has quite a lot of songs that became earworms to me because of how catchy they are. Various songs in it, like Reboot It Suffragette City, The Rap Battle and Gift Wrapper, and Flotus Flotus What Do You Know About Us, among many others, have become some new favourites to me due to the lyrics, composition, and just fun the actors have about singing. They even roast Lunatics Unleashed in Suffragette City, which made me giggle. And speaking of giggling, the humour! Now, given that it's based on a classic cartoon all about comedy and slapstick, you'd expect the humour to be of top quality, and thankfully that's the case here. I really loved the jokes and references in this reboot, and some references here made me feel happy to see again, like the songs or references to other episodes. Though I don't want to give away too many of the jokes because as the Joker said, if you have to explain a joke, there is no joke. Some might be worried that there won't be adult jokes, but don't fret, they're here too. And I thought a couple of them were pretty clever, like the joke in the segment of Mice and Memes where Brain asks Pinky what people use the internet for. I'm not going to explain it, but I'm going to let you think about that. The jokes on the Warners themselves are also really good. I like whenever they're self-aware about something, like the fact they're in a reboot, or when they're reusing a persona in Warner She Wrote. I really loved how they even brought back Her Cool Yakko, or when they're running out of ideas in Good Warner Hunting. One thing I was somewhat worried about is if it was going to have some break from the comedy. Thankfully, this reboot isn't afraid to deviate from the comedic pace either, like in the segment Rodent Trip, where Pinky and Brain are stuck in the driverless car, and Pinky asks why Brain always wanted to take over the world. Brain expresses his traumatic experience with an experiment scientists try with an electroshock piece of cheese, and this explains his motives and why he wants to take over the world. Another emotional moment was in Bride of Pinky, where Pinky's monster bride left him for the Brain's monster, and Pinky felt really down about it. I know people were worried about the show's political humor, but I can't really complain about it since the original brought up a lot of politics at the time. In fact, I kind of find it clever that they predicted Trump would not be president in 2020. One thing I can criticize the humor for is that they got rid of the stingers in the credits and the Wheel of Morality, which is a big shame. Also, while the jokes mostly hit, and they do make great references, unless you saw the original beforehand, or at least know about it beforehand, some of these references to the original might fly over your head. So unfortunately, you're going to need some knowledge of the original to fully enjoy this reboot. The characters. Now, this was the part I was honestly the most worried about initially. However, after watching it, I felt a little bit more confident. Of course, it wouldn't be Animaniacs without the Warner siblings in it. Same goes to Pinky and the Brain, and they all act how they did in the original, and have awesome voices and make great deliveries. Even if Yakko sounds a little older, but that's not the issue. That's a given. However, some characters, but not all, well not yet anyway, do return. We get to see Ralph B. Gard return, for instance, with a different color scheme, but still, he's here. And he's just as funny as he was in the original, and still as much of an oaf, with Frank Welker returning to voice him. Dr. Scratch and Sniff also returns, though he's only in 2 episodes, so unfortunately I can't talk about him much. Though I can confirm that he's great and enjoyable. Of course, Rob Paulsen voices him again, but I imagine he'll appear more often later on. As for Thaddeus Plotz, the CEO of the original, nope, he doesn't return, as he retired, possibly from the Warner's lunacy. Instead, he's replaced with a new CEO called Noah Rita Norita. And I know this may be an unpopular opinion, but I think that's for the better. I never really liked Thaddeus Plotz as a character. I mean, yeah, he was funny, but he was kind of a douche as well. He was greedy and selfish, and him getting his comeuppances felt really satisfying. Nora, on the other hand, is a calmer, more collected character, well, mostly, who seems to be doing a better job of handling the company than Thaddeus, and I really like her design, personality, and voice. She's voiced by Stephanie Escajeda, hope I'm pronouncing that right, a voice I haven't heard before, but I think it really fits her personality and appearance. Another new character I find interesting, though again doesn't appear much, is Niels Neidhart. He's an extremely arrogant and buff athlete, who is a sore loser. It's funny to see him attempt to do something in the Olympics, only for the Warners to one-up him in exaggerated ways. The show also has some one-offs that I also found cool and intriguing, but I think it's best to move on from that, but for the most part, the characters are very good. One thing I find interesting, and something I predicted, is that there are some new segments. Well, 3 of them. Starbucks and Cindy, The Incredible Gnome in People's Mouths, and Things That Go Bump in the Night. Starbucks and Cindy is about an alien named Starbucks who gets stuck in the house of a girl called Cindy, and he tries to escape, but every time he tries, Cindy always notices and prevents him from escaping. I thought this short was actually really cute and sweet, and I really hope it gets more in future seasons. The voice acting was interesting, as that apart from the intro, There's only one voice with dialogue in it, Eleanor Johnson, who voices Cindy. And not only does it sound improvised, the quality of it is charming, even if it's low quality, and it reminds me of Dexter's Lab episode Dexter and Computers Get Mandark. She's sort of like Mindy from the original Animaniacs, even their names rhyme, and Elmira from Tiny Toons in that they really love animals and they are very playful. I thought that was a cute segment. For the incredible gnome in people's mouths, I mean, I liked it, but I don't know if it fits with the Animaniacs given how weird it is. The idea is that it's a gnome that goes in people's mouths to talk about the truth about people, like if there's something dubious about someone you're dating. This segment in particular has Sean and Marcia, the latter of which has a gnome in her mouth. They get married, but the gnome reveals that Sean doesn't know anything about Marcia and only wants to marry her for her pinball collection. I thought it was kind of funny, but I didn't think it fit with the Animaniacs series. Having said that, however, it does have some potential, and I can imagine this gnome to go through different situations. I definitely didn't hate it. I wouldn't mind seeing him again, to be honest. And finally, we got Things That Go Bump in the Night. In my opinion, this is probably the weakest new segment. I just feel like the joke gets stale very quickly. It's a dark shot with a bunch of eyes of monsters of different sizes talking about how one is sitting on the other, and another one bumping into each other, and then at the end there's a giant monster that wants to take over the world. Unlike Starbucks and Cindy and the incredible gnome in people's mouths, I can't really imagine this one to return without the joke repeating itself, and it's a big shame because I really appreciate the effort of trying something new. Now, time to give some quick highlights on a few segments. I don't want to give too much away given that it's still relatively young, but still. One of them was called Good Warner Hunting, and it's about how the Warners wonder what happened to the original characters. But then it's revealed that a hunter called Dr. Walter Grubb hunted these characters and put them on the wall. And the only characters left for him to hunt are the Warners. I love this one because of the jokes, the setup, the self-awareness of there not being many characters in the reboot, and we even get to see a shot of many of the original characters from the original series, like Buttons and Mindy, Slappy and Skippy, Minerva Mink, etc. And considering the reboot said Minerva wouldn't return, this is probably the best bait and switch ever. Make of that what you will. Hopefully future seasons will feature more characters like this. Here's another favourite segment of mine, this one focusing on music called Here Comes Trouble, where the Warners mess with an orchestra composing for their cartoon because they wouldn't compose it properly. That one was also great because of the composition of the classical music and the bouncy animation that even went in rhythm with the music, which made it feel like I was playing Rhythm Heaven on the DS. I always liked seeing cartoons with episodes where the background music plays a big part in it. One more segment before we move on, as if I go on about all the segments I liked would be here all weekend. 1001 Narfs was also a great one, as it shows Pinky the Brain coming across in Sultana. No, not that kind. That kind. And retells some old Arabian Nights stories with a Pinky the Brain twist. I find it hilarious that Pinky stories always tend to be more interesting to the Sultana than the Brain stories. It shows how naive he is with his storytelling. So, what do I think of this reboot? Well, it certainly has a solid first season, but unfortunately it isn't perfect. Mixed bag of new segments, lack of some things from the original, and it's not one of those reboots I can suggest to just jump into without prior knowledge of the original. However, when it gets good, it's really good. With its great animation, even if it isn't as good as the original, awesome voice acting, witty humour, interesting characters, and it was just so satisfying to watch. If you loved Animaniacs back then, you're bound to love it here. Also, to be fair, it is still only in its first season, and hopefully the future seasons will be even better and stronger. Hopefully the future seasons will have new segments that are more frequent, that will feel more like the spirit of the original. Maybe even some classic characters will make full appearances. I mean, they did tease it, so it better be true. Perhaps an animation improvement will be nice, like adding more shading to the characters, and maybe it could potentially surpass the original somewhat. But as it stands, even if it isn't as good as the original series, it's definitely a great start to the reboot, and I still recommend you give it a go. So, final verdict, this season gets a 7.9 out of 10. Not a bad start here, Hulu and Warner Brothers. It's a shame Hulu is an American exclusive service, and as I want to give my support to them. Thankfully in Canada, it's airing on actual TV on Teletoon. Hopefully where I live, we might get the same treatment. But still, I highly recommend giving this a watch. If you haven't seen the original, just watch some episodes first, or even watch some clips. They're everywhere. If you have seen it already, then yeah, go ahead and check this out. You'll have a blast. Okay, I think I went on long enough about this reboot. This is World Jake 2012 saying goodbye, nurse.